Well, today on Rebuilders, we are chatting with Terry Walling, and today we are looking at some new postures that he has been exploring in his own life.
Yeah, these are postures which point towards renewal, but not just renewal that happens once, a life of continual renewal for the church, renewal for individuals, and ways that I think we can begin to see the contours of the next thing that God is going to do. So it's a great episode.
Yeah, we're looking forward to sharing it with you. If you want to know a little bit more and get some behind the scenes information, you can subscribe to our mailing list by heading to rebuilders.co. Let's get into it. Hi, welcome to Rebuilders. My name is Liddy. I'm here with Mark, with Daniel, and with Terry Walling.
Hey.
Woo!
Good to be back.
Yeah. Come on.
Don't sound
Mark,
so excited, Mark.
Sorry.
Were you just stifling a yawn?
No. Well,
on this
Are you falling asleep?
we're on to
hectic
episode 3.
Monday
and
afternoon.
I just had, we had our renewal sessions last night, which
We
was
did.
great. So it was a
Yeah.
big day at church and done multiple episodes today, plus a big bowl of noodles and dumplings. So, yeah.
They're beautiful, though.
It was a delicious lunch.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's the, I feel like in some cultures, this would be now siesta time, yeah? Mm-hmm. What's the history of siestas, Mark?
I have no idea.
You're
Well, the history
surprised.
is called micro Sabbaths.
Oh, siesta means 6 hour. 6th hour.
6 hour. Oh, you get to the 6 hour.
Ooh.
Yeah, I was going to get in a whole making up something around micro Sabbaths and, because I just want to create a new viral phenomenon.
Micro Sabbaths.
Yeah. If you're doing a weekly Sabbath stop, you need to do micro Sabbaths. Every 6 hours, I have a Sabbath.
Mark, we need a new book.
Micro Sabbaths.
Micro Sabbath.
Yeah.
I love it.
Oh, I thought you were about to say something, Daniel.
No, I was just
No.
commenting.
Okay, good.
I'm
I
enjoying
think
this.
you were having a micro Sabbath.
just had a quick micro Sabbath there.
I think my brain had a micro Sabbath.
I get so much more done with micro Sabbaths.
Where is this discussion going?
More news on a micro Sabbaths in a future episode. But today we are talking about, I guess, a notion that you kind of brought up in our first episode with you, and you've definitely mentioned it before about what's got you here is not going to get you there.
Right.
So things that you learn in a transition, and part of getting the most out of a transition is to understand that there are some things that are going to need to change.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so when we were talking about, looking at what a renewal could look like,
Right.
what's emerging
Right.
at the moment, these spot fires that are occurring, there are forms and structures in the Western church that kind of need to be undone.
Right.
So in your experience, Terry, what have you noticed about some new postures that might be important to take us to the new place?
Well, I think it's first important, even though, some like the term, some don't like the term, to acknowledge that if we're going to get to the end and finish well, both as individuals and really as the church, then we're going to have to go through a series of paradigm shifts. Mm-hmm. So when I say what got us here won't take us there, we're going to have to see ourselves, God, leadership, the church, the whole issue of context. We're going to have to see those differently if we're going to get to the place where we're still in love with Jesus at the end and in the beginning, focused on his mission and still choosing to live a sacrificial life. So that has been part of my own personal journey in the last few years, to basically realize, this stuff's a lot easier to teach than live out. And there's some significant paradigm shifts that have actually been holding me back.
Yeah.
And, the reality is it's holding leadership back. It's holding the church back many times by not recognizing that what got us here was really a lot of it, good and helpful. Mm-hmm. But it won't necessarily be the same worldview and the same approach to take us there if we're going to continue on with what God's at work doing. So
Yeah.
I just identified about 5 different of these paradigms that I've been noticing and apply from coaching leaders all over the world.
Yeah.
in terms of making the change, and also coaching individuals who, let's just be honest, are a little bit older, but not done.
Yeah.
They haven't checked out. They are still part of the church. And even there's, some of them that are part of your guys' constituency and the people you guys are reaching to help them see, okay, we can get there, but it's going to take shifts. It's going to take seeing things differently. So the first one for me was we have adopted in the church, the attractional church, and we've adopted a paradigm, I think, overall in the church that's an import from the West that says it's all got to be based on our planning and our actually, going through the process of figuring out where we're going to be in 5 years. Then we work backwards in our 5 years. We start doing it now.
Yeah.
And it actually, then we incrementally get there. Was that a helpful paradigm? Well, when the change and the global wasn't connected and all of that, it kind of worked. There's a part of it that I did for 30 years with the church in terms of helping come alongside churches. And I led strategic planning processes. Is planning wrong, Terry? No. But we need to adopt the posture now of interruption. And that posture is we've got to come to the point of recognizing God's moving in, that we don't know where it's going. And pushing the planning button right now is not going to be helpful.
Yeah.
The button we got to push is the surrender and obedience button and follow him to a new place. Like Abraham had to follow without knowing where he was going. Abraham could not put the strategic plan together because he had no idea what the destination was. And I think that's the era that we're in right now. So you want me to kind of go down through these? You want to talk about each one? How do you want to?
I think it'd be interesting, like perhaps even if we sort of vibed off each one.
Yeah, let's vibe.
With the vibe. But it's interesting. One thing I've noticed just in the culture of late, and really it's only been the last few months, and there's a few books come out, but in the secular world, there seemed to be a backlash against consultancy. And there's a book, I think it's called When McKinsey Came to Town, and there's another book which is coming out. I heard a podcast, I've forgotten the author, but it was really sort of almost how people have outsourced that sort of strategic vision out of the church. And, some of it's also pushback on how powerful and huge some of these international consultant companies are. So I don't want to muddy the waters too much here. But I wonder if you see there's an element where we're almost having to go and try and find vision, and even have that concept of vision. And I remember, I think it was George Barna wrote a book on vision. It was really big, and everyone was writing vision statements. And again, I think really helpful. But I'm just wondering, were people seeking vision without seeking God?
Right.
And I also remember too, there was often a thing where it was like, get all the people in your church to contribute, and then together you're going to come up with the vision.
Right.
I'd just be interested in your thoughts on that.
Well, I think the switch is not do nothing.
Yeah.
The switch is a posture away from having to determine the vision because we don't know where it's going to now clarifying and behaving around the values. So I think it's a switch to more of a values-driven operation together. If operation is probably not the right word, but it's values-driven versus vision-driven. And it's leaders' responsibility to help to actually make sure that our behavior is matching the things that we value. So part and parcel of what we're doing, that still takes some organization, some thought, some planning, whatever. But that getting everybody's fingerprint on it, therefore we can move forward kind of a deal, sometimes skews the values because now we're valuing what everybody wants versus the fewer key things that are holding us that we all want.
Yes.
And the synergy needs to be built around those few core values that makes us us. How are we behaving accordingly? And what is it that in the days ahead we can do to reinforce those values and even advance our thinking on how we can best be this kind of people? So I did a ton of planning, but right now with where we're at, it's kind of like pack your bags, go. But here's how you stay on the road. Here's the guards that keep you moving, keeps the car on the road, and that's the values. So those are the things that keep us now moving down the road, as opposed to this compelling vision of a place we don't even know about. It's almost impossible. So, yeah, first one.
Great. The second one.
Posture
You're happy
of
to go there?
stillness.
Yeah.
Posture of stillness has to do with this battle of intimacy or being and doing. And most people who get into leadership or most people who are involved in leadership are doing oriented.
Yeah.
And this is actually now a return back to the presence of God and being. A deeper work within us. Not getting lost in mysticism,
Yeah.
but recognizing that us being with him is now the greatest need that we have as opposed to doing for him.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a false guilt I think we created in the boomer deal that you were always achieving. Well, right now we're always aligning. We're always accomplishing. No, right now it's always a moment in time where we're actually investing in our personal journeys.
Yeah.
So it's not just staying in that place, but it's actually putting that in the lead. We're going to do out of B
Yeah.
versus, we're going to continue to do hoping that it'll produce being.
Yes. Yes.
Where I think in our generation, we were thinking that if the more we do, the more we'll get closer to God.
Yes. Yes.
No. The more we're closer to God, the more we understand what he wants us to do. So it's that
Yes.
reposturing of ourselves that if we're not accomplishing, we're not failing God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're actually probably in our own self becoming more like him. And the things that happen through our life are not necessarily all the great buildings we build,
Yeah.
but it's the fact that we stopped and took time with that person.
Yes.
Why?
Yes.
Because we're more connected to a God who said, love thy neighbor,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
versus build that building kind of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I think it's Wu Wei in Chinese. There's a strategic concept of being still, and I think the saying is like a man standing in a river is still doing something because in a sense you're not moving but you're resisting against the water, and it is such a different cultural paradigm than what we're
Totally.
used to because we just like move, take ground, go forward, and I do wonder at times, that stillness is the beginning, as you're saying, really of closeness. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yep.
if you're never with someone, you're constantly
Yep.
moving. It's impossible to have relationship.
Yep.
But that is a totally different
Totally
paradigm
different.
to how we haven't. Someone just sitting there, we think they're doing nothing. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like and also too, like even I just think as well for leaders. Now I realized this the other day. No one's bored anymore. Because we're constantly stimulated. And I wonder if stillness
Interesting.
is countercultural
Yep.
because boredom is actually the fuel for creativity.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So like we
Wow.
can never get to new things because we're constantly never getting bored.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was like a teenager, back in the time before the internet had really, taken off and we were constantly coming up with crazy creative things to do because we were bored.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and this is kind of like I said earlier on, Lydia, this has kind of been my journey a little bit. I was always moving, always accomplishing. Let's do the boomer. Let's do something great for God.
Yeah.
Not in and of itself evil
Yeah.
or bad, but what it did, it produced a church now that actually ends up in America getting assessed mile wide, inch deep.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Not the depth of it.
Yes.
And therefore we're doing activity that I think people look at and go, well, actually that's even done better in the secular world or whatever.
Yes. Yes.
Versus, oh, whoa, there's something here that's different.
Yes.
That I want to kind of pursue, which takes us to the third one, which was the posture I've learned of wholeheartedness. And this has been a real hard one because once I got through it was unbelievably freeing. But because the church is so compartmentalized, wholeheartedness is about causing everything of being around apprenticing the life of Jesus.
Yeah.
As opposed to doing the things that Jesus did. How do I become who he is?
Yeah. Right. Okay. Can you give us an example?
Yeah. I mean, It's too common, so forgive me. But anyways, flew all around the world, had no idea who my neighbors were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Flew, talked, helped the leaders, got on Zoom, everything like that. No idea.
Yeah.
Now it's like, that doesn't align very well with what I hear and see in the life of Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm going to do, it sounds so simple, but I'm just going to do the simple thing of put a chair out, bring our barbecue out. We got a big driveway, sit around and start talking.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of Jesus going to Matthew's house, and I'm thinking of Jesus going to Zacchaeus, and I'm thinking of, wow, what am I doing? I'm carrying out all these activities and defining it as being fully committed.
Yeah.
But he doesn't really have my whole heart.
Yeah.
What he really, and it's not consuming my actions. It's actually just fulfilling my things to do things.
Yes. Yes.
So wholeheartedness then has swept into what I think about other people and how I view them. And in America, the race thing and the gender thing and all of that. I didn't look anywhere near like him.
Yeah.
I looked like, the latest news media outlet thing or whatever. So it's now, I've got to realize the Christian life is not something I tick off. We all know that. It's something that I am.
Yeah.
How much does my life match his life?
Yeah.
Wholeheartedness.
Yeah.
Fully surrendered.
Yeah.
A lot of boomers, I think, would tell you, or a lot of people who are older would tell you, I've gone to church all these years, and yet there's a lot of things in me that don't represent his life.
Yeah.
How do I get back to being who he is?
Yeah, that's good.
Sorry, I just hit the microphone, Daniel.
Carry on.
Yeah.
It actually reminds me of, God reminded me of the passage in Corinthians, which is so often used in weddings, but love is patient, love is kind. And I reread it the other night and I was so just struck by the call to love and what love actually looks like. And it just,
Yes,
it looks
that.
exactly that wholeheartedness that you were talking about.
And it's hard because we've convinced ourselves for 40 years it's about going to church. It's not necessarily not about that, but it really is about being apprentice of Jesus. And it was really hard to get to the point to say, I've been a church attender, but I'm not a church apprentice. I mean, I'm not a Jesus apprentice. Ouch. Ouch.
And I wonder too, I think for older generations are very much about duty. You rent because that's how you got identity or whatever. And then I wonder whether younger generations or emerging generations or whatever, or perhaps the last 30, 40 years, has also been about life maximization. Come so that learn how you can do this, and here's a sermon on this, and on your money, and how, that's almost what the church has repositioned itself. So it's gone, come because you're a Presbyterian and you must come to come, we've got all these great programs and we can make your life better. But almost both of them are falling down. And now it's that wholeheartedness. It's coming to be an apprentice of Jesus, and even you can try and do that programmatically.
Absolutely.
But you're talking about, and what you spoke about too, Lydia, it's that sense of love, being caught in Jesus' love, so you want to become like him.
And some encouragement there. My life, I want to live again. In other words, I want my life to be a life that looks more like him and less like me. Not in belief, but behavior.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that, it scares everything out of me and brings all the excitement back.
Because that's pretty countercultural. I don't want my life to look like my life because the whole thing is promising you can discover who you are. But it's just discovering him.
I know this is hard to believe, but the Western church is educated way beyond its level of obedience. So with that, I want to move toward obeying. I don't think the issue anymore is just accumulating information. It's by willingly put yourself in a place of being transformed.
Yes.
And we think as a boomer, or we think as a church attender, well, that's happened through the years of attendance.
Yeah.
Discipling is lifelong. No, it needs to be reimagined and happen now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
two others, quick ones. How about the posture of surrender? I need to go after the fact of all the things that I don't know as opposed to the things that I do know. And going after a life that looks more like a learner than a teacher.
Yeah.
And a life that looks more like somebody who is discovering versus somebody who has postures themselves as arrived.
Yeah.
So I want to learn all I can from those who are starting the journey, and as opposed to all those who have it together at the end of the journey.
Yeah.
And I want to quit saying things. I didn't get into it too bad, but quit saying things, well, I'm going to leave it now to the younger people because I've done my bit.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to actually learn now from the younger people and let them mentor and coach me because I want to make sure I'm a part of it, what God wants.
Yeah.
So that for leaders in particular, that is actually the ability to not just continue to recreate a program or recreate a schedule, but create within that new learnings that we go after together.
Yes.
Segments of the population we need to better understand so that we can love. Things that actually seem so counter to what we first believe. I mean, I'll show you how old I am. I remember when the conversation of spiritual gifts was radical.
Oh, wow.
I mean, don't go, oh, wow, like, oh, wow, Lenny. I mean, you know, but the reality, it was like, what? We're talking about spirit? You know, I mean, today it's like almost passe kind of a deal.
Yeah.
We got to go after the things that we don't know about. I'll even be, you know, for the American church, we got to quit denying the issue that the church has never been involved in racism and all those. What do you mean it has? How do we start moving toward the things that I think in the end are causing so many to be alienated from the church as opposed to want to consider the church? But it happens when we surrender that we already know.
Yeah.
Mark, you look like you have something so powerful to say. Go
Honest, my brain's always ticking away. I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting as you say that, because in some sense, could one say, like you mentioned before, finishing well.
Yeah.
And we talk about that as an individual. And it's just interesting. I think about these 3 episodes we've done, and they're separate, but there's an overarching narrative. And, you know, we began talking about the sort of renewal that happened in the late 60s, early 70s, which was that sort of first moment for the baby boomer generation. And in a sense, is it not just about individuals not finishing well, but almost I'm hearing what you're saying too. There's a grief in your heart that you see the generation starting well, but perhaps not finishing well.
Oh, totally.
So it's not just you've studied that in the lives of leaders, but I'm hearing that in a generation.
No. And that you are hearing correctly.
Yeah.
Breaks my heart. I mean, I want us to finish well as much as, almost as much as I want myself to finish well.
Yeah.
Do you know one of the definitions of finishing well, or one of the key characteristics, is lifelong learner?
Yeah.
You know, one of the greatest things a younger leader can see is an older leader still learning.
Yeah.
Still changing, still going after the new.
Yeah.
There's so much more. Go, move beyond where you are, move beyond what you know, into the things that he's doing.
Yes.
To help you know in a greater way who he is.
Yeah.
So that, you're right on the nose. I just feel like it started with an unbelievable moment, the Jesus movement.
Yeah.
And I think we kind of actually went down from there by grabbing it, organizing it, politicizing it, and actually turning it into something the world really wanted nothing to do with.
Yeah.
That breaks my heart.
And it's almost like, you can have that, you almost become it's like the performer who was some young, fantastic thing
Yep.
performing, and then
Yep.
near the end they look like a parody
Yep.
of themselves, you
Yep.
know,
And how we all sit almost back and look with,
Yeah.
oh, that's a shame, isn't it? You know,
Yeah.
well, they could be so much more. They could be handing it off, or they could be doing all that stuff. That's amazing. Which really takes me to the last posture, and I think this is the hardest.
Yeah.
The posture of together. I think we created false community in the baby boomer world. And it's a small group movement, what you're talking about, Terry. No, what I'm talking about is doing life together. And most of my generation does the life that it wants, but not the life that it needs to be done together. So we'll sit around, we'll have coffee, we'll talk, we'll banter back and forth. Let's do a few little small group, neighbor nudges, discussions or whatever, and go home.
Yeah.
That is not community. That is maybe some genuine fellowship or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think in the days ahead, we have to do it together.
Yeah.
And I've got to expose myself to other people, and that learning of life together
Yeah.
is more and more, I think, what I see when Jesus' methods was to do it with them together. And it was the together that changed them more than even sometimes all of the great messages.
Yeah.
It was having to work it through together.
Yeah.
So what are you saying, Terry? We got to re-engage back into not just being in a small group. We got to re-engage. What does it look like when 6 to 10 to 12 of us decide, how do we together become more like Jesus, invest more of our time together, and actually come to that place where we're willing to let others help us change into the future. And I think the community issue has been lost in the words. So how do we apprentice the life of Jesus with others so that we change and offer to others that kind of change? Life change for us. So anyways, some lessons,
It's interesting too, because I think in some ways, like almost what the church has done, because if you look at the overarching story of these podcasts, is you begin with that really sort of genuine, very organic, Newport Beach, young people hang out, and but then we talked about it almost became packaged in a form, and in some ways I'm hearing the same thing with community, and I think we can look at the baby boomer generation and point fingers or whatever, which is but in some ways, I think we've inherited that, and younger generations perhaps even more intensely. Like, I just want to turn up every 3 weeks to that church, and they seem to value community. I'm hoping I'm going to turn up for an hour and get community every 3 weeks. It just doesn't work like that, And I hear what you're saying. There's the prize of surrender is revelation. But also maybe it's also surrendering ourselves to that process of growing close. Like, you don't get to have community without giving up something.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's that giving up my generation refused to do.
Yeah.
I'm going to give up the time, the way I want it, my priorities, to engage with you in the inconvenient time. Yeah. To actually learn that somehow that's going to actually continue the process of making me more like him. So there's wonderful people who are older who love Jesus. I just think are hungering. How do I make the move forward? And I think if we would allow him to interrupt us, we'd build it around intimacy. We'd go after it in a much more wholehearted way. We'd recognize that it's in the not knowing that we actually begin to know, and doing it together are some of the things. Yeah. And that there's so many more, but maybe that's a place to begin.
Yeah, it's so great. So helpful. Terry, a lot of this is in a book that you've got coming out in the middle of this year called The Unlikely Nomads. We will make sure that we come back to that when it does get released, and remind our listeners, because I think it's a really helpful paradigm shift to have a concept of as we navigate this whole new realm that we're exploring.
I think I'm more excited now about my walk with Jesus than I've been in 20 or 30 years.
Wow.
In the midst of this incredible transition, I more want now to to go on this journey of finding out the new church that he's trying to create than I ever did. Before I was trying to defend what I've done. Now I want to be a part of what he's doing.
Yeah.
And I think that in and of itself is the rallying point for so many. So I just want to encourage some of the older believers out there, don't give up. This is not all for naught. God is transitioning all of us to a new kind of church.
And I think it's been really helpful to even reflect for those who perhaps are feeling that hunger, feeling that expectation at the moment. You know, we began by talking about renewal, and, you know, our prayer is for renewal to come, and we might have incredible outpourings of the Holy Spirit. But also what I'm taking is that's brilliant, and we need that recharging, but also we need to finish well additionally.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
'Cause it'd be a tragedy if in the next 5 years God's just pouring His Spirit everywhere, and then in 30, 40, 50 years, people are not finishing well.
Yep.
And so it's that continual renewal.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, that ongoing process of renewal, which is another characteristic, and I won't go long, but another characteristic of those who finish well, repeated times of renewal.
Yeah.
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 I'm not going to run on yesterday's renewal. I'm going to be a God chaser and go after him in a new, fresh way.
Yeah.
And have my passion and my life being, Jesus, what are you at work doing, and how do I join you in your work?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
great.
finishing well.
Oh, and also a great place to finish
Yes.
this
Yes.
episode.
Yes.
Just want to
Finish
thank
this
you
episode well.
again, Terry. We are so thankful
Yeah.
for the way that you have and continue to support us as a staff team. It's deeply helpful and so important, but also the way that you have poured into leaders through across the world, not only through our podcast, but through all that you do. So again, if you didn't catch it in our previous episode, you can get a whole bunch of different resources through Terry's organization, Leader Breakthrough, at leaderbreakthrough.com. And there is a whole list of books, there's a podcast, and there's all sorts of tools and resources to support you as you navigate leadership in a changing world.
Yeah.